big week for global markets. China and US will restart trade negotiations. Central bankers will gather at Kansas City. Fed's annual Jackson Hole Symposium. Turkish markets are closed this week, while the Venezuelan president has decided to devalue the currency and eventually bring in a new version of the Bolivar. So how are all of these events expected to shape trade? Let's ask Peter McGuire. He's Chief Market Strategist at FS Securities. Peter, good having you. Thanks much for joining in. Just wondering, does the Venezuelan crisis, economic and political at the same time, have any collateral damage to any markets, any large markets in the world? Or do you think it will be restricted to Venezuela and a couple of trading partners?
Well, good morning. I think a couple of things. First off, it's going to be very much, I think, contained to Venezuela in the short term. If it's a contagion across other South American nations, and that's just that'll just be a work in progress. Though I don't think anyone is really as in a dire situation compared to Venezuela. If you look across the South American landscape, economically, you would have to question what on earth has gone on here. Considering what Chavez was able to do, we've got one of the largest oil reserves in the world for any nation, Venezuela, and to devalue and then to have a cryptocurrency, backed by petro. It's just I find it hard to even summarise. So it's yes, and then you're talking about the Turkish situation, but at the present time, I'd have to say it's going to be a very interesting couple of days how it plays out to the Venezuelan market and what impact it has.
You would reckon no large impact on world markets. It won't be as high on the pecking order as some of the other larger nations would be, right?
Well, I don't think so. You would say not. I mean, the Turkish situation, I think, has got far more gravity, considering its population base and where it's located in Europe. I mean, Venezuela's got a population of only a couple of million people. You've seen a mass exodus so far as their population moving across to other nations and to live. It's a little bit like, probably in some ways the Syria situation without the civil war. Are we going to head down that pathway? Who knows? If you're going to see, civil unrest, but it's certainly got the framework and all the understandings to paint a picture that's going to lead to great economic hardship and in turn, monstrous concern for its residents.
Any impact on crude, Peter, as a result of what's happening in Venezuela?
I don't necessarily think so. I think that if you look at the picture, I mean, the production coming out of the Middle East and all of the OPEC nations has been outstanding. US crude's, pumping, beyond imagination. And there just doesn't seem to be anything there to really, underpin it to knock it, terribly higher or lower. I think, even with that US dollar the way it is, I think it's going to be range bound unless you saw something dramatic happen from a geopolitical or a weather outage that had, succession of hurricanes, coming up into the Gulf that, if you had 4 or 5 of those, which you may well do, it's common to have those in, August, September, October, but nothing on the horizon at the present. So I'd have to say that's going to be range bound. But as we all know, that it can change very, very quickly if you see, major concerns. But I think at the present, it's, staying in these sort of range bound trades.
Okay, Peter, we'll leave it at that. Many thanks for joining in today and giving us that perspective. So if at all there could have been any concern, it would have been surrounding Venezuela, and that doesn't seem to be that big a concern both on the economic front, more importantly in the crude front as well. So contrary to what a lot of people tended to believe, this may not impact, according to Peter McGuire. But you never know. Let's wait and watch. These things have a funny way of rearing their ugly heads when we least expect them.